Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're going to break down an absolute nightmare trip to Arizona for myself and for the Phillies. It's another one of these on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. 5 years sports talk radio, host over at 97.5 The Fanatic here in Philadelphia. 3 years I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and this is my third year hosting Locked On Phillies. So thank you for checking us out. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. That'll get you new notifications when episodes are posted, and it's a great way to help us out here on Locked On Phillies. I appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to. And today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. They're the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, h-vac, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast with SupplyHouse.com. The Philadelphia Phillies are getting shipped coast to coast from the West Coast to the East Coast today. They're done their 10-game road trip, so an off day tonight. And they definitely need to reset a little bit. We're going to talk about why I don't think it was like a complete failure of a road trip. I don't think it was a good road trip. I don't think it was a bad road trip. I think it was a weird road trip. And I think the Philadelphia Phillies are still in a spot where they're kind of coming out of it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about that series in Arizona because I was out there to witness two of those games firsthand. And it just, I don't know what to say about this team. So you take 2 or 3 from the Dodgers. You win that series. It's your first series win since the All-Star break. It's your first in 7 opportunities. You have momentum. You go into game 1 against the Arizona Diamondbacks, and you go ahead and you find a way to win that game. And then you get absolutely bludgeoned in 2 of the next 3 and lose all 3 of the next 3 to lose the series. I will say that second game out there in Arizona against the Diamondbacks. First game, nice win. Love to see it. Didn't get to do an episode on Friday because I was out there. I was traveling, flying cross country myself. But it was a nice win on Thursday to keep that momentum going from that Dodgers series. Like, I thought the Phillies were all the way back. I still think they're somewhat back to themselves, or at least coming out of it. I'll explain why that's the case in my mind coming up next. But there's just some really rough things that happened out there in Arizona. I think everybody by this point, or a lot of people, have seen the picture of Bryce Harper with his hair all over the place. That's kind of the feeling that the Phillies had when they got done in Arizona. It's kind of like, what in the world just happened? Friday night was weird because you had more opportunities to score. It was a low-scoring game. Zach Wheeler was pretty darn good. He wasn't amazing, but he wasn't bad. Like, he did everything you probably could have asked him to do to put you in position to win that game. Bryce Harper went yard. It's like, okay, well, you got some of the things you're looking for. And then the first pitch of the 9th inning, Jeff Hoffman serves up a first career home run to Del Castillo that ends up being a walk-off home run, and the Diamondbacks steal game 2. And it kind of felt like that's where the series shifted, right? It's just that was if I'm approaching the Phillies matchup with the Diamondbacks mentally, it's, man, we know we're better than this team. Well, more talented than this team. But history would tell us we haven't really matched up all that well against them. Obviously, ace on the mound, throwing well, every opportunity. You give up that walk-off, and it's like, shoot, man, I know we took game 1, but we can't consistently beat this team. And then they fell apart the rest of the way. Like, game 2 is not a bad game. It was just a game that sucked to lose. Game 3 on Saturday was a bad game. Aaron Nola was not great. The offense was not productive enough, and you only totaled 1 run in that game. But it wasn't like I don't know, man. You guys are going to call me too positive if I say it wasn't as bad as the score indicates, because a lot of those runs that the Phillies gave up in that 11-1 loss were on the shoulders of Junior Marte, who was terrible, should not be on this team anymore. And the second that Ranger Suarez or Taijuan Walker are Ranger Suarez is fully activated, you're going to see Junior Marte, see ya, gone, DFA. Like, I don't want to be too harsh on the guy because he's not the reason the Phillies are in the slump that they're in, right? It's not all Junior Marte's fault. But he's not a major league pitcher. Like I said it from the second he walked into the game, this is over. This guy has no shot to keep this game close, and wouldn't you know it, he absolutely implodes, and the Diamondbacks are hitting batting practice off Junior Marte. Like, that's not totally on Nola. It is on the offense for not creating more opportunities so that you put guys out there to keep the game closer, because the Phillies, well, they definitely waved the white flag when they put Junior Marte in that game, and it was only a 3-run game in the 7th inning, so I get why people would be upset by that, but long road trip, you got to save your arms. Somebody's got to throw. Marte was the pick. He completely did not do his job. That's miserable to see. It's not an indication on the bullpen. It's an indication that, well, you're kind of in a tough spot right now. You need to get some guys back so you can fill out the roster with the proper arms. But still, the offense was quiet in game 2 and in game 3 and pretty much outside of the first inning of game 4. I mean, you had the opportunity in game 4. You lost 12-5 yesterday against with Christopher Sanchez on the mound. Sanchez was just, man, not good at all. He's a weird case, right? Like, I guess you do see this often. I like to think that ace pitchers, like really, really good pitchers, the Zach Wheelers of the world, like they have blow up outings maybe once or twice a year, maybe a little bit more than that, like, but no more than like 3 or 4 times a year will you see like a crazy blow up outing from those guys. I'm talking 6, 7, 8 earned runs, stuff like that, where it's just like incomprehensible. Really, it should only happen like 2 or 3 times a year, but it does happen. And I guess that's fair to say about Christopher Sanchez, because he's normally pretty darn good. But yesterday he goes out and he only gives you 4 2/3. He allows 7 runs. He allows 12 hits. And it's just like, dude, that's one of those performances you can't win. Your starting pitcher loses you that game. I don't care that you score 5 runs. They're scoring 12. You're screwed, man. And that's tough to deal with too. So, like, I don't put games 2 and 3 on the starting pitching as much as I put it on the offense. I don't put game 4 on the offense. I put it on the starting pitching. And while Sanchez is entitled to have a bad start every once in a while, I'm not going to demolish him for it because he's been really good for the Phillies this year. It was just one of those series where every time you had something going, the Diamondbacks shut it down. Every time you were struggling a little bit, the Diamondbacks stepped on your throat. That's a team. Like, they're becoming one of my most hated teams in baseball. I hate everything about that team. I do. Like, I hate that they don't really have like crazy star power. Ketel Marte, who got rolled up on in game 3 in that Saturday game. Garrett Stubbs slid in the second, rolled up on his ankle. That's not ideal for Arizona, hoping that he's all good and everything gets better with him. He's a bona fide MVP candidate. Guy's a great player. Corbin Carroll was great last year, hasn't had the best year this year. Zach Gallen, strong starting pitcher. The rotation's pretty solid for Arizona. They're a good baseball team, but you don't have a Harper. You don't have a Turner. You don't have guys like this. When you look at the Yankees, a Judge and a Soto. When you look at the Dodgers, a Freeman, a Betts, and Ohtani. Like, you don't have those guys. When you look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, and maybe that's what annoys me. They shouldn't be this good, but they get the most out of their team. Also, you look at that and you say, okay, that ballpark, a lot of people bring it up as a place they hate to go play. Like baseball players, people that cover the sport, say it's a tough ballpark because it's big and it's quiet and feels like a giant warehouse almost out there in Arizona. What I will say, I'm going to say this from my time out there. And by the way, I scrapped the videos I shot. None of those games were all that fun to put any content out of. One, they got absolutely smoked. The other one, they got walked off on. There was nothing really fun Phillies-wise. I saw them score a total of, I saw them score 3 runs. Yeah, well, I need to reevaluate my vacation schedule. Bottom line, though, solid ballpark. I thought it's not my favorite, but nice enough. And there were a couple, like Saturday was a louder day. They did the NLCS championship ring giveaway, and that brought people out. There were a good amount of fans in the building. So I didn't mind the ballpark, but I get how people can go out there and kind of like laze their way through a series, players, I mean. And you're also looking at the back end of a 10-game road trip. We're going to talk about that coming up and the spot that the Phillies were in playing the Diamondbacks. But this is a team that just matches up well with the Phillies. And I'm not saying, wow, I hope I don't see the Diamondbacks in the Phillies way in October. No, like I'm not scared of the team. You've had bad series against other teams. I'm not saying like, oh, well, it'll be a cakewalk. They're a solid baseball team. Tip of the cap again, but I'm not like, they're not world beaters. The Phillies right now are not either, but they're not a team that I'm terrified of being in the Phillies' way. They're just a team that matches up well with them, where I'm just like, that was a really bad time to have a letdown series when it looked like momentum was building. And yet the Philadelphia Phillies went out there and did that. And it was on every facet. The defense wasn't great at points. At points, the defense was really good, but the defense wasn't as good as it needed to be. The base running wasn't as good as it needed to be. The starting pitching was okay at points, but not as good as it needed to be. The bullpen, definitely not as good as it needed to be. Like all of it. The offense, did I say the offense already? The managing was not as good as it needed to be. And I'm not going to like kill Rob Thompson for it, but because back end of a 10-game road trip, you're trying to figure out how to get these guys through without burning anybody out. But still, you got to find ways to win ball games. And it was just a nightmare trip to Arizona. That was really, really bad by the Philadelphia Phillies, embarrassingly so, to be out there for the Saturday game, game 3. And I can't even imagine the folks that were out there for Sunday, because that was just as bad too. I don't know. You give up 23 runs in 2 games. I would say that's a pretty darn blank series. I'm not going to say it, but you know what I mean. Coming up next up, I'm going to make an interesting case. I still think the Philadelphia Phillies are pulling out of the slump that they were in. I do. That hasn't changed since the series against the Dodgers. I watched the games. I saw them in person. I know what's going on with this team right now, and I know they got shredded the last 2 games. But I'm going to make the case as to why I think they are still coming out of it, and I think it's a compelling one as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about SupplyHouse.com first. They're our title sponsor for today's episode, and you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. They're the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, and you can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Well, get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. It's awesome. Every Trade Master, listen to what you get. You get access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. How great does that sound? Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks over with our friends at SupplyHouse.com. All right, now, hear me out on this. And I know there's some people that aren't going to, because there were some people. I got back to the radio this morning, so I already did that show, and I saw some of the reaction from the fan base. There are people saying the Phillies are not going to make the playoffs. Folks, the Phillies have a 7.5 game lead in the division. The remaining strength of schedule is the 25th hardest. They have the 6th easiest schedule remaining in baseball. Like, this team is still good. They're still going to make the playoffs. If you have questions about whether or not they're a World Series winning team, that's valid. If you think they're not going to make the playoffs, you're certifiably insane. Check yourself into a mental institution. Like, that's just it. I don't have time anymore for this alarmist, oh, this team stinks. They don't stink, okay? They're not playing good baseball. You can question how deep they're going to go in the postseason, but if you think this team's not good enough to be there in October, you're sorely mistaken. There's going to be a red October, but that doesn't really matter to the fan base, and I understand this, if they're not going to go all the way. So that's why we're going to have the conversation about whether or not the Phillies are getting back to normal, because they need to put themselves in a better position to be the top seed in the National League, so that they have the easiest path, so that they can realize those dreams of being World Series champions, National League champions once again, all of that stuff that we want for this baseball team. That we need from this baseball team based on the way they played at points this season and the talent they have on the roster and the stuff they put us through the past couple of years. But I said after the final game of the Dodgers series, wow, you found a way to win the series. The Phillies have come out of it. They're back to being the baseball team that we thought they were. And then they go to Arizona and they win the first game. And then they lose the second one on a walk-off and get smoked in the other 2. We already recapped it, right? I don't need to run through it again. You saw the games this weekend, or if not, you saw the recaps of the games, or you heard me recapping there. It was ugly. So why are they still coming out of it? You have to consume this in a couple of ways. One, it has to be a bigger sample size than just this game or these couple games. You need to see like how the team is playing over a trending stretch. To some people, that's 10 games. To some people, that's 5 games. To me, I normally try and go 10 games. I also try and look at the most recent 2 or 3 series, depending on where they're at. And I will shape this sometimes to fit my argument. So feel free to tell me, hey, man, you're cherry picking. I don't think I am. But listen, I do want to be positive about this team in a certain way, even though they got smoked, which there's nothing positive about that whatsoever. And that stunk. But let's look at it. So my good friend John Kincaid from Kincaid and South Tunis, the show that I'm on over on 97.5 The Fanatic, brought up that the Phillies last, 8 weeks worth of games. So 66 games, I think it comes out to. They're 24-32, or maybe they're 24-30 or something like that in their last 64 games. Whatever the case, that's an extended stretch of below 500 baseball. It is. And that's part of the reason I'm arguing that the Philadelphia Phillies are coming out of it. That's sub 500 baseball. Whatever the exact numbers are, it's generally that. That is not good. That is well worse than what they played when they were playing 700 ball almost to start the year. So that's a slump. That's what they've been in for the past pretty much 2 months since, I think that's since the London series might be when the mark is for that time frame. So what have the Phillies done recently? Let's look at it. They lost the most recent 3 games. So you could say they're on a 3-game losing streak. You'd be absolutely correct. That's fair in the short term. In the most immediate, they're not playing well. But before that, they won game 1. Then they won the final 2 against the Dodgers. So they're 3-3 in their last 6 games. Then they lost game 1 against the Dodgers, but they won the final game in Seattle. So they're 4-4 in their last 8 games. I look at that and I say, West Coast road trip, tough swing. The Phillies could have been playing amazing going into this, and we still would have had this West Coast 10-game stretch circled on the calendar. Second best team in the National League by record in the Dodgers. The team that knocked you out of the playoffs last year and won the National League in the Diamondbacks. The Mariners, who are a quality baseball team who can be pesky at points, have their deficiencies, but definitely have their proficiencies too. Those teams for 10 straight games on the West Coast, different time zone, no off days, tough spot. And you take the final 8 of those games, you go 4-4. Okay. That in and of itself is probably acceptable. But when you look at the fact that for a 2-month stretch leading up to this, the Philadelphia Phillies had played sub 500 ball, and you've played 500 ball over the last 8 games, that's legitimate, just mathematical improvement. 500 is better than the Phillies have been playing. And I'm not saying, the Phillies are great. They're back to normal. They're the team that we thought they were. Everything's going perfect. I'm not saying that right now to you. What I am saying is there have been a clear, objective improvement, winning percentage over the past 8 games than what they had played over the past 6 weeks. And those sample sizes don't match up, but that's a sign to me that they're starting to come out of it. The other thing you have to consider is, was there a reason? A reason that we would normally give them the benefit of the doubt for that they had trouble in Arizona. Let's say that the Philadelphia Phillies had 75 wins and they had been playing above 500 baseball in the last 8 weeks. And they come into this series with Arizona on the back end of a 10-game road trip. What would be the things that we'd be talking about as cautionary things because we had the luxury to? Now, they're alarmist things. But if the Philadelphia Phillies had been winning baseball games, we still would have come into this series at Chase Field and said, the narrative around Chase Field games, Phillies don't really play all that well out there. I mean, kind of a sleepy ballpark. You go out there in the desert and there aren't that many fans all the time. And it's kind of a quiet ballpark. The acoustics aren't great. You can sleepwalk through it. So that already says when you match up with the Diamondbacks on the road, you can expect maybe a little bit of a letdown. Whether you should expect it or not, different conversation. But that is a narrative that has existed. I'm not making that up to protect this year's team. Also, the Diamondbacks, we talked about it in the first segment. They're a team that just matches up well with the Phillies for whatever reason. We saw it in the NLCS last year. We saw it in the series they played in the regular season last year. The Diamondbacks just play this team well. I don't know, man. Baseball is such a matchup-specific sport. Do I think the Diamondbacks are the better baseball team? No, I don't. I'm going to continue to say that. Diamondbacks fans can continue to get mad at me. They were better than the Phillies this weekend. I think on the best day, like, this is how I'll say it. On both of these teams' best day, the Phillies are better. That's not going to matter if the Phillies don't show up to play, but that's just proof positive. Like, the Phillies had this issue with the Marlins a couple years back, who were not a better baseball team than them, but they would play the Marlins. They would just absolutely soil themselves. Matchups are a weird thing. That would have been something we would have taken into account even if the Phillies were playing well. The other thing is, back end of a 10-game road trip, going from West Coast to East Coast after that game was played yesterday, like, that's just looking at the final game. But you get down to those final couple of games on a West Coast swing, guys are tired, man. Guys want to get back. That's why it's so tough to play 10 games in 10 days on the road against quality major league teams when you got to fight really hard against the Dodgers. It's not like it's a letdown series because Arizona's a solid baseball team too. But it is kind of one of those, it's hard to play at that level for 6 straight games and be constantly like zoned in and everything, at least in August. October's a different animal, or at least we believe it's going to be. I don't know. I just look at all of it and I say, there are valid reasons why we would have been concerned about this series, even if the Phillies had been playing well. Those reasons don't go out the window because the Phillies aren't playing well. They still exist, which is why I would have been comfortable with a 500 road trip. Now, they come back 4-6. That's below what I wanted. So part of me wants to say they're not coming out of it, but part of me says recently they've started to show winning again. And they have a bit of an easy stretch coming up here, at least for the coming week. So we'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode and preview that because off day tonight. But I don't know. I still feel like the Phillies are coming out of it. That's just one man's opinion. Feel free to disagree in the comments. I appreciate you listening either way. Coming up, we're going to talk about who to worry about in the National League because I think we need perspective on how the Phillies are playing. And perspective has been a buzzword recently on this show, but need some more to tell you a little bit about where they're at right now and why we should be a little bit more comfortable come postseason about where this team could be. We'll talk about that as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. First, though, let's talk about my friends over at Ibotta. Ibotta's awesome. Like, you know them. I've talked about them a bunch of times, but there are a bunch of things this summer that you're going to purchase, right? Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do these things have in common? Well, you're probably buying a ton this summer, but you don't have to stress out about the cost. You use Ibotta and you can get cash back on all of your purchases when you stock up on all your summer essentials. So how does it work? Well, Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. And the average Ibotta user earns $256 per year, but it doesn't come in points or anything. No, not like those other apps. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You just simply add in the offers on the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money all yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands, shop at over 1,000 retailers, including all your favorites. I mean, it's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is even offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB. When you register, just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. I also want to tell you about my friends over at FanDuel. You know FanDuel. We tell you about them all the time. And man, you could probably make a lot of money betting against the Phillies right now. Or you can make a lot of money betting on the Phillies when everyone else thinks they're dead. Listen to Connor if you believe me. I am not held responsible for any of your gambling losses. I just want to put that out there. But FanDuel is going to make sure that you have the best experience, whether you're making the right bet or not. And they're going to do everything they can to give you special props to make sure you have a great time playing. Sports right now, it's not the hot time for sports. You got baseball, you got football kind of beginning, but the Olympics have just wrapped up. And sometimes in the summer, the sports aren't sportsing like you want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going anytime. You just open the app, you dream up bets whenever you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers, not just new customers, no, all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with America's #1 sportsbook app. All right, we're going to get into a peek at who's chasing down the Phillies, but I do just want to remind you or thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. The Locked On MLB podcast hosted by Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan. It's a great overview on what's going on with baseball right now. It's funny, it's informative. It's a great time of year for it as the playoffs draw closer by the day. So take a look at division races, overall storylines, everything you need. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So check out Sully on Locked On MLB. Now, let's look. We're just looking nationally because I firmly stand by this in any sport, anytime, right? I do not look at teams when I'm evaluating the postseason that are in the other league, the other conference, all of that stuff. Because to me, if you get to the World Series, if you get to the Stanley Cup Finals, if you get to the Super Bowl, if you get to the NBA Finals, at that point, you'll take your chances. I don't really care about matchups in a championship. Like, when you get there, you get there. That series against the Astros, it wasn't the Phillies' best matchup, but we didn't go into that postseason saying, oh, I don't know if the Phillies match up with the Astros well. We got to the World Series and we're like, hell yeah, we'll play the Astros. Let's go. We'll take on anybody. And that's how every team that gets to the World Series is feeling by that point. So that's a conversation for late October. But for now, we know the Philadelphia Phillies, most of us know, everybody should know, the Phillies are a postseason team. Like, come on, folks. They're going to be in the playoffs. Don't be crazy. But we're only looking at the National League, or at least I'm only looking at the National League as far as matchups and all of that stuff and how the Phillies have handled these teams so far. And I think it'll make you feel better about where they're at and what they've done so far this season when you take a peek at it this way. So right now, if the season ended today, the Philadelphia Phillies are still the number one seed in the National League. Now, by tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Dodgers. The tiebreaker is the season series. The Phillies are up 5-1 in that season series over 6 games. So you have the tiebreaker over the Dodgers. That also tells you kind of what we can know, not what we need to know. I'd like to see more games between the Phillies and the Dodgers. That's fun baseball. But what we can know about the Phillies and Dodgers right now is the Phillies won 5 of 6 games. They won all 3 at Citizens Bank Park. They won 2 of 3 out there at Dodger Stadium. Even when they were in a skid, the Phillies handled the Dodgers well. I don't think the Dodgers are looking at their team saying, oh, we stink because we lost to the Phillies. I think they're saying, well, that Phillies team might match up well with us. Bottom line, that's about as comfortable as you can be against a team as good as the Dodgers. I don't know if the Phillies would beat them in the postseason, but if we do come to that, the sample size is going to tell you advantage Philadelphia. So that's one team that's trying to chase you down. Another team is the Milwaukee Brewers, who are right back there trying to catch you. They've been playing really good baseball. They came to Philadelphia. They got swept in Philly. You're going to play them for 3 more games up in Milwaukee. That can change, but that's another team that's trying to chase you down. You are better than them based on track record and sample size and head-to-head matchups. Like, it's not that, oh, wow, the Phillies haven't played well against some good teams, so then they're automatically not going to be good against the Dodgers and Brewers. Like, no, if you match up well against certain teams, you could see it with the Diamondbacks. They match up well against the Phillies. They're a good team. They're a great team when they play the Phillies. That's just how it is. So the Phillies take advantage of those types of matchups too. If you're worried about the Dodgers or the Brewers, you don't have a leg to stand on. You're just worried about this team. And that's okay. You can be worried about this team, but history would show you this season, those teams are not as good as the Philadelphia Phillies in head-to-head matchups with Philadelphia. So those are 2 teams that are trying to chase you down. The third team that's going to come in there, the top wild card seed, it could be Atlanta. It could be Arizona. It could be San Diego. Like, there's a bunch of teams that are kind of in that middle zone. What I will say is Atlanta, if you're scared of them, I think you're crazy. They're not as good as the past couple of years. They haven't been able to beat the Phillies in the postseason. They do not match up well with the Phillies. And I don't care really whether the Atlanta Braves play the Phillies well in the regular season. And I don't know that that's going to be like the case when everything's said and done. You still have some big series to go against the Braves. We'll get more sample size on that. But with the injuries and the history, I'm not looking at Atlanta as a team that's like, ooh, I'd be scared to play the Braves. I think if they see the Phillies coming, it's just like, wow, how many more years can we get knocked out by this team? That might be a little bit cocky of an attitude, but if you don't have that attitude, I don't know what you've watched the past 2 years in October. So I'm not worried about the Braves. The Diamondbacks, would I be concerned about matching up with them in October? It wouldn't be a fun series, I'll tell you that. I would not look forward to it. Do I think the Phillies are the better team? Still yes. Do I think that that will be a fun, easy series? Absolutely not. So, sure, that's a team. But the Diamondbacks could just as easily not make the playoffs as they do make their way in. The NL West is really tough. And then you look at some of the other teams. I mean, who else are you worried about? The Mets? No. The Padres? No. Like all those other teams in the middle of the pack, they don't hold the candle to the Phillies. And it doesn't mean they can't beat them, but it means that against basically every team in the National League not named the Diamondbacks, you should feel pretty good about what this season has told you about the Phillies' chances to beat them. Plus, it'll be a home series for the Phillies because right now they're the 1 seed, or it should be if they continue to play good enough baseball the rest of the way, which I think they're coming out of it. I just, perspective like that is important. And when you look at who's chasing them down in the National League, there's not really that many teams that you should be overly worried about as like presenting matchup problems, or that there's been significant data to say the Phillies can't beat these teams. They can handle anybody. Will they? We'll find out in October. There's no way of knowing now, but that's something to keep in mind as we hopefully see the Phillies come out of this stretch this week, because they have 2 games against the Marlins, then 4 against the Nationals. We're going to talk about it in tomorrow's episode. But an off day tonight, so take your time, go get a nice dinner, watch something fun on TV, take a break from the Phillies, deep breath. We'll get back at it, and I am going to make a bold prediction on tomorrow's episode about what's going to happen this week between the Phillies and 2 division rivals. So we'll get into that, but that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for checking us out. Also, please don't ban me from going to away games. It's not my fault they lost in Arizona. Please and thank you. I know people are mad at me like it's my fault. What are you going to do? Thank you again for checking us out. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.